people, but also a lot of real issues that needed to be resolved and helped with,
This is the Leo Clamaco podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the Leo Clamaco podcast. Today's guest, he's a personal brand coach, a marketing guru, motivational speaker, empowering people to unleash their full potential and build unforgettable personal brands. David Allen Tracy. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Leo.
No problem.
Good to be here.
Awesome to have you here. David, start telling us a little bit about yourself, your background, where you come from.
Yeah. I was born in Wisconsin, but at age 5 forward, my parents left Wisconsin and they went into international nonprofit work.
Okay.
So literally we traveled around the world, lived in different places, different states, different countries.
That's incredible.
Including Guatemala, Mexico, Canada, and then eventually landed in Panama, where I grew up most of my life. So 25 years in Panama.
Wow.
So I'm from the U.S., but very Latino, de corazón, like very, my heart is like,
That's awesome. Are you an only child?
No. I have a younger brother, a younger sister, and then we had 3 foster kids as well that are basically siblings to me. They are siblings.
Right.
They're not adopted technically, but they've been with us for years.
So all of you traveled together to all these countries, or eventually a kid was born here, a kid was born there?
Yeah. So my biological brother and sister, yes, we traveled a lot. And then the other ones were from Panama and they couldn't leave the country.
Got it.
And my youngest, almost adopted brother has left the country and been to the U.S. and lives in the U.S. right now with my parents.
Cool.
But yeah, it's cool. And, like growing up cross-culturally, a lot of people, certainly here in Florida, there's a lot of people from many areas of the world.
Oh my goodness.
Everywhere, basically.
Yes.
And so when it comes to
It's like a small Latin country.
right? So I feel very at home in Florida because I
Yes.
feel like I'm in Panama in a weird way.
Yes, for sure.
So, I think that was a huge component of my life and story. We grew up amongst indigenous tribes. My parents worked amongst indigenous tribes in Panama. So we frequented the rainforest and the jungles, sleeping in huts, cooking over wood fire.
That's incredible.
It was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And worked with all the indigenous tribes, but specifically it was the Embera that I have the most connection with. And, talk about like just beauty, and the rainforest, beauty amongst the people, but also a lot of real issues that needed to be resolved and helped with. My parents worked with helping young girls essentially not end up pregnant by the time they were 13 and basically living in poverty the rest of their lives. And they helped them get an education, retain their culture, their language, their customs. However, they all wanted an education, but education wasn't available to them. So they were able to get an education, graduate from high school. Many of them went into university. Many of them went into international nonprofit work themselves and traveled. They're now like trilingual. And so that was really pivotal and really instrumental in my life in terms of where I am today. Met my wife in 2009 in Panama. She came down to train, volunteer for a bit in the same nonprofit.
She's American?
Yes, from Minnesota. And we got married that same year. Now we have 4 daughters. My first 3 were born in Panama. My youngest was born in Hawaii because we lived in Hawaii for a couple of years as well.
That's awesome.
And my world was international nonprofit work. I traveled to over 40 countries, doing everything from humanitarian work and earthquake relief and flood relief and building homes for people who had lost their homes and medical brigades to urban development to many different things, just all kinds of things you can imagine, from working in Panama to around the world. And then...
Do you consider yourself Panamanian?
I am not Panamanian in the sense that I never got a cedula or citizenship there.
Right.
I am Panamanian in the sense that is where I grew up from age 7 forward. So much of who I am is Panamanian. However, when I speak to Panamanians, like, hey, tú eres Panameño, you're Panamanian. Like, but when I'm in the U.S., most people wouldn't know I'm not from here, but I don't feel like I'm from here.
Right.
I don't feel very American per se.
Got it.
But I am, but I'm not.
Got it.
So,
what made your parents want to go do nonprofit and go leave their country and take their children to different countries and go help other people?
So for my dad, there were numerous things. I know that he had had a series of dreams that God spoke to him outright and was like, go to a land that needs you, essentially, and that I love these people. And so he had that.
Wow.
There was that kind of sense of calling that he had. And then there was different layers to that happened over the course of several years, where he got training and went to, first kind of thought, well, I'll be a teacher and I'll teach English as a second language. Then they went to get more training in different nonprofit organizations and universities and such, and basically ended up in Panama to just kind of help with a local nonprofit there. But then the founder's father died and she had to leave, and suddenly he was left in charge.
Wow.
And that just led to them staying long term. So that was a lot of it, was that, and it continued to evolve and grow throughout the years as their nonprofit began to continue to expand in different areas, especially amongst the indigenous tribes. We started out in the center of the country, more rural, and then ended up more towards the city and then towards the indigenous. So there was different focuses over the years. They now are still
It's incredible
in that whole world, but they're currently working on a very global level with the University of the Nations, and they're basically traveling all the time, equipping young people and training future leaders. So yeah, it's super cool. So that was a huge part of my upbringing. Very cross-cultural, very diverse. We had volunteers from around the world coming in.
Wow.
At any given day, we'd eat meals together with people from Korea, from Africa, Asia, from Latin America, all over the place. And so I just had this real appreciation for understanding and appreciating different cultures and different perspectives. And all of that lent itself to me being a personal brand coach, and previously to that, having an international marketing agency. I would have never have gone into marketing. Like, I would have never been like, I'm going to go into marketing.
Right.
Like, that was not a thing for me. It wasn't until I got diagnosed with liver cancer when I was 30 that I had this wake-up call to, what do I really want to do with my life? Because I had almost kind of taken it for granted that I was going to do nonprofit work. That's
Right.
what I was doing. And then it was like, no, almost all of my ideas that I had were not nonprofit ideas. They were all business ideas with a philanthropic bent to them.
Got it.
That was going to, I wanted to make impact in communities and impact in people's lives, but having the economic resources to be able to do the things I wanted to do.
Right.
So that's what essentially caused me to pivot. And we ended up
Let me stop you for a second. How'd you get liver cancer?
So that's a lot.
How did that?
Yeah.
How'd that happen at
wasn't-
30?
Yeah.
Because I don't see you as a drinker. I don't see that.
No. I had cancer when I was 14 as well.
Wow.
So I went through chemotherapy, and it was actually the chemotherapy that caused the liver cancer.
Got it.
Not even related cancer, but the amount of chemicals that they pumped into my body from the chemo caused
at
damage
14.
to my body. So I was very sick for like 5 years. That was also a big part of my story, in that when you're 14 and your life gets on hold that way, you really do prioritize what matters. You start to really have these deep conversations with God. You start to really
For
go
sure.
like, okay, what is my divine calling? What is my destiny?
Right.
What matters in life and what doesn't? And I didn't want to waste any time anymore. So I've done a lot of things in my life as a result of that, because I was forced to stop. I wasn't able to
And
just
reflect.
I mean, I was
Yeah.
in bed for
Yeah.
such a long time.
What country were you in?
Panama.
Panama.
We did all the treatment in Panama. And, I remember specifically going through like CAT scans and MRIs and all these tests for hours and getting poked and prodded and just laying there and having conversations with God, very deep ones, and just dreaming, a lot of vision and ideating, and ideas would come to mind, because I think so often nowadays, young people especially, and grown-ups
Yeah.
of all ages, we are so distracted.
Oh my God, extremely. In this TikTok real world, where we're just swiping.
Swipe.
Yeah. like.
And it's like, for what? Like,
Yeah.
it's such a distraction. And then we live in this buffet society where everything's available to us at our fingertips at any given moment.
Yes.
I want this pleasure, I want this thing, I want that thing.
Amazon will deliver same day in hours.
We are used to instant gratification and instant satisfaction, and it leaves us empty. It leaves us
Yes.
wanting. And so
More. A big black hole, a big void.
and it never fulfills, and it never fills.
No, only gets bigger.
Yeah. So literally, like, that was very clear to me when you are facing this reality that, first of all, I could have died. I had a very aggressive form of cancer, very aggressive. And it was God speaking to me when I was 14, saying to me, "You have cancer. Go tell your dad now." Literally, as I'm laying in bed, it wasn't audible, but I had this strong sense that I knew I had to go tell him. And we went and found out, did tests, and sure enough, it was proved to be cancer. And
Why do you think you didn't pass away?
because I know that, well, the when God spoke to me, it was, "And I have a calling on your life, and it's going to be good. So don't be afraid. You're going to go through a hard time, but I'm going to bring you through it. This will strengthen you." So I had this very clear message. And so I'm still learning what that is. I'm 38 years old, and I feel like I'm just starting my life in some respects, even though I've done so many things.
Right.
I think for me, being a personal brand coach is really going to the root of who are you as an individual. So many people don't know who they are.
No.
So many people go through life doing what others want them to do or who they think they should be, whether that's parents, peers, media, society.
Yep.
It is completely a projection, and they're living this false reality, this counterfeit reality that's fabricated. It's not even real. And so,
Which makes them not love themselves.
exactly. And if you can't love yourself, you actually can't love people.
No.
So there's this kind of like, we talk about all these issues around the world that we see, all this division, and it comes down to this reality that people are not, they're looking for answers outward rather than upward and inward. So, yeah.
Yeah, I can speak from experience. For a long time, I was just out seeking pleasure, and just wanting outside energy, outside sources to make me feel special, wanted, and fulfilled, not really grasping or understanding that it comes from within.
Yeah.
Right? If I don't do all those things for myself, nobody will, and I'm going to keep seeking it and going after it, and it's going to be a never-ending cycle.
Exactly. We were gifted with free will.
Yeah.
We were gifted with free will, and that, it's a two-edged sword.
It is.
With that free will, we can do good, we can do bad, we can waste time, we can earn time, we can make a difference, we can waste it. So it is a gift to have that, but it's weird because when I left the nonprofit realm and went into marketing, I'm like, how does this fit? Marketing is essentially understanding people well enough to know what's going to cause them to gravitate to your business. And so I've had a lot of dealings with people over the years and a lot of different very high crisis, high stressful situations.
Yeah.
Consumer psychology is a huge component of it. And then as COVID hit and the pandemic hit, and all these business owners are going through these internal crises. Now their businesses aren't doing good. Their marriages aren't doing good. Their personal lives aren't doing well. I found myself in the marketing, we're doing marketing strategy, quote unquote, and it ends up becoming a counseling session because they're crying because they're falling apart. And so I ended up becoming certified in a modality of inner healing called theta healing, which is helping people overcome trauma through the theta brainwave. And I became a certified theta healer practitioner. And then after that was like, how do I fuse marketing and this together to where it makes sense? And I became a personal brand coach. And because personal branding is basically how do you market yourself?
Yeah.
The problem is that so many people market themselves based on what others think they should be or what they think others want them to be, as opposed to who they really are. So my tagline is, you want the world to know who you are, but do you know who you really are?
Mm.
And I think that's the big thing. When you have someone who can walk into the room and they command attention, it's usually their authenticity. That's basically it. Like, there's something unique about that person, something different about that person. They're confident. They're not projecting. With authenticity, you have to know the author. You have to know the author to be authentic.
Ooh, I love that.
So the author is in two parts. It's God and it's also you. You have to know who's writing your story. Then when you have the authenticity component because you know the author, then you can command authority. Same root words in all three words. So author, authenticity, authority. People who know themselves operate in authenticity. People who operate in authenticity command authority. And it's not an authority from a superior way or a top-down thing. It is simply your confidence, not haughtiness, not arrogance.
Right.
You know your stuff. You know who you are. You're comfortable in your own skin.
You're grounded.
You're grounded.
Yeah.
And you watch people who are influencers, true influencers. They are so comfortable in their own skin to where they can talk and everybody listens.
Right.
And so they're commanding attention. And so it's going to look different for each person. Everybody's authenticity is different. Everybody's way that they draw in authority is different.
Someone that comes to mind is Gary Vee.
Yes. Tell me about that.
I just think he represents what you're saying. I think he's very, very authentic. I think he's one of the most authentic influencers out there. He doesn't give a fuck. He's perfectly okay with who he is and how he is perceived and how he is seen. He doesn't care. He's gonna do what he wants, how he wants it, and you're gonna watch it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. Well, that's the thing is whenever you are comfortable, you stop apologizing. I'm not talking about lack of humility.
Right.
But I am talking about the standpoint where I don't have to walk on eggshells anymore. This is who I am.
Yes.
This is my story. This is the way I dress. This is my whatever it is.
Right.
And people go, okay. Because so often we're the ones apologizing. They're not asking us to. We're doing so. And it's usually that is rooted in trauma. It's rooted in some form of trauma that said you cannot be you because
Right.
you are inadequate, you suck, you failure, you whatever you are.
Mm-hmm.
We believe it. And so it
Your
has
parents told you this when you were little and it discouraged you.
your peers, you got bullied,
Right.
your teacher said something, your grandpa, your uncle, something happened.
You're not tall enough, or you're too tall, or you're skinny, or you're too fat. Whatever
Whatever
may
it
be.
is. And people believe it. And I know that I did. I had my own traumas that I believed for many, many, many years. And they really were hard. They were hard to overcome. And I found myself behaving in such a way where what I believed internally was a manifestation externally in my daily walk. And I was constantly working myself to sickness, constantly sick all the time,
Wow.
even after the cancer. I was constantly sick because I worked myself so hard. I never took me time. Why was I working so hard all the time? Why was I doing that? I was doing it to hide. I was doing it to cope because if I was silent, if I was still, if I took time to rest and I took time to think, I had to think about the traumas of my childhood, which I had some severe ones as a child. So it was like, I don't want to think about that. I'm going to keep busy. As long as I'm projecting out externally that I got it together,
Right.
then I'm fine. But meanwhile, I was falling apart inside.
What would you say, based on your experience, what's the best way to deal with failure and rejection?
So fear of failure and fear of rejection and fear of success. I actually just did a reel this morning about fear of success, which is ultimately fear of failure. It's fear of responsibility. We don't believe that we can handle something. And I think that in every stage of life, that's the way it is. When you first are going to school as a kindergartner and you're like, I got to go to grade school now, you're a little intimidated. Then you go to junior high and then middle school and junior high and then high school and then
Right.
university. And now you have your first job or whatever it is. Every time there's this intimidation, it's the fear of the unknown. It's the fear of the unknown. We don't know, and we're not prepared to think about the unknown. What we're prepared to do is think about what's right in front of us. That's what the world and the whole system wants us to do,
Right.
is to think about what's in front of you.
Be one-dimensional.
100%. What I do to overcome fear is to project what will it be like to be in that situation, to evaluate the cost ahead of time, to look at that blueprint and think, what does this success or this career going to look like on the daily? And to really think through those details so that I'm not caught surprised.
Right.
That whole
Think
component.
of every possibility.
And you can't always, but you can up to a
Right.
point. And I think that for me was really important, especially when we were doing like earthquake relief in Haiti in 2010, for example.
Wow.
And there was devastation and domestic violence and theft and all kinds of people had died. And it was really awful. And I've got this whole group of volunteers who had never been anywhere like this, young students from the States and from other
Wow.
places. You had to think about what would happen in each potential emergency or situation. Now, I'm not talking about this kind of like anxiety where I need to think about everything or else I'll fail. But it's essentially looking ahead and drawing out those end items and milestones, and then essentially understanding what that could be like. What are the positives? I'm going to have a life that's going to look like this, that, and the other. But I'm also going to have this kind of responsibility. And this is where mentorship comes into play, finding people who have been there and done that. So you're not going in naively or blindly and saying, what was
Yeah.
it like for you? What should I be aware of? Not necessarily living by exactly what they did, because you're going to have your own path, but understanding what it's going to cost you. And when you take those steps, so that's number one, is get the information. Number two, make the plan. Number three, once you make the plan, start implementing it.
Execute.
Actually
Take action.
execute the
100%.
plan and take the steps.
Which is, I think that's where most people fail. They're able to think about it, theorize it, but they can't really take action.
No, because we're taught not to. Education system says not to. every institution out there says not to. Essentially, we're told to kind of be like the sheep and the herd.
Be a peon.
100%. To be the minions of society.
Mm-hmm.
It is not this whole being. We talk about being independent, but we really don't. There is no such thing. If we look at the way everybody wants you to be like everybody else, you have to agree and think like everybody else and talk like everybody else. And if you're different, you're offensive. And I'm not trying to be rude here.
Right.
But essentially, anybody who's walking in their authentic self is going to offend people. It's impossible because you're going to make someone unhappy.
That reminds me of a quote. If you don't have haters, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, it's true. It's impossible. Every single influencer, every single person that has made a difference in the world, whether that was for good or for bad, caused waves, and those waves shook people.
Yeah.
Whether they liked it or not. And so you have to be willing to take the steps and to understand that you're going to be very uncomfortable at first. It's kind of like when you go to the gym for the first time and you're like, I can't do this. Like these guys are like super fit and I want to go and hurl in the corner right now.
Yes.
And I'm
so
like,
intimidating.
It's so intimidating. But you keep going, you keep going, you keep going, and pretty soon you're that guy.
Right.
Or you're almost that guy. and you're like, all right, this is awesome. I can do this. And so as we do this, you look back, I would have never imagined myself being where I am today 15 years ago.
Same.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
A year ago. You just keep going, you keep going. Now, the other thing with that, the next thing I would say is there's this false statement, I think, which is never give up. I agree in the sense of commitment without vision without commitment is fantasy.
Right.
We need to have commitment. But at the same time, a lot of people never give up on something that's not working. So we have to understand what's working, what's not working, and give up on what's not working over time.
I completely agree with that.
If it's proven that it's not working.
Completely agree, 100%.
Because you keep doing the same thing the wrong way, you're wasting your time.
And it's insanity.
It is insanity.
Yeah.
So you have to be willing to pivot. COVID taught us we had to pivot.
Yes.
AI technology, pivot. Economic issues, pivot. Whatever it is, we have to be willing to pivot. You have to know the times.
And adapt.
And so how do you keep adapting? You have to keep going back to step one, gather the information.
I agree. Trim the fat.
Yep. So you have to. So that's basically what I would say is you can avoid failure. Yeah, no, there can be mindset issues that are trauma related that you can't get over it even if you try that. So that's where I like to pull that thread of trauma. We often operate in patterns in our life, cyclical patterns.
For sure.
Over and over again. We actually see the same things happen in our lives, the same mistakes, the same failures, just in bigger ways as we get older. And
I've noticed that I also feel the same way a certain time of the year.
Yes.
You know?
It is. We are
like these same thoughts start coming back around this certain time of the month, and it's like certain time of the year, and it's like, what?
No, I know that we live in a world, a system that is designed with 365 or 366 days a year. And there are certain patterns and traditions and holidays and trigger points and family connections and things that happen that are cyclical. The 4 seasons, if you live up north, are very cyclical. They create these patterns. We don't have it so much in Florida, but like there are seasons.
Thank
here.
God.
Yeah, right? Majorly. So we have with this patterns and behaviors, that these cyclical patterns that we can disrupt, we can break it. But it requires us going back to sometimes the original trauma. If we're trying to change it from a surface level, the tip of the iceberg, it's not going to work. We have to go down. We have to go deep. And if we go to that deep level, where did that trauma begin? I began to operate in this behavior because this happened, and this created a belief or a false reality that I adopted that then created behaviors and outcomes later on in my life that I now continue to operate in. If I can change, how do I change the belief? I can't change it from the tip point. I have to go to the root. I have to go where it began. And if I can do that, then I can pull that. And then all the patterns change accordingly. So that's what I try to do when I help people in a personal branding component. It is technical, it's marketing, it's PR, it's media, it's all the things. But it's also like, let's get down to the nitty-gritty personal stuff.
Right.
Who are you? Where do you come from? Why do you exist? What's your purpose? What's getting in the way? Where do you self-sabotage? And we deal with that.
I want to get a little deeper and personal with you for a moment, if you allow me.
Of course.
Before you heard God telling you to go tell your dad that you have cancer, what was going on with you? Why do you think that cancer developed when you were 14? Were you holding on to something? Were you?
Yes, I was. So it's very personal, actually. And
You don't have to share as much as you
no,
want.
I'm
You
going
can
to.
be
I'm an open book, and
Okay,
I'm
cool.
actually writing a book, and
appreciate
this
that.
will be in that. So
Cool.
I had testicular cancer. And so when you're 14 going through puberty, you're like, eh.
Wow.
You don't want to talk about that.
No,
So
you
there was a
don't.
mass growing on my testicle.
That's
and
awful. That's crazy.
however, you brought up something very interesting, and it's not a question I've ever been asked before, but I know this to be true. When we have trauma and we have negative things that happen, it can often manifest itself physically in our bodies in the form of sickness.
Yes.
I had a trauma as a child where I had been molested sexually. Not once, not twice, many times
Wow.
by different people. And I never told a soul. Not until I was 19 did I finally tell someone. So I carried that with me my whole life, mostly. And at
That's
age
heavy.
14, it manifested in the form of a tumor in my sexual organs. So I'm not saying, and of course, people can go, we have all these different opinions. But as I've worked with
I
people,
think that's immaturity.
yeah, talk with anybody. There's so many studies that are showing that relationship between the
For
body. We are
sure.
body, mind, spirit. We are interconnected.
The pain in the body is just to alert you that something's wrong,
Mhm.
spiritually, mentally.
People who have gastric issues, stomach issues, stress, trauma,
Yes.
liver issues, bitterness.
Yeah.
There can be so many things.
Yeah.
Deep grief, pulmonary. So there can be so many ways where the body manifests trauma. And yet trauma is an energy. Okay,
Yes.
it's spiritual, it's emotional, it's physical, but it's also an energy. It's a frequency that it needs to be released out of our system.
Yes.
In all ways, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. Has to be. If we do not release it, where does it go?
Mm.
It's like kinetic energy.
Stay stuck in the body.
Causing friction, causing inflammation. What is cancer? Inflammation. So it is all very connected. People who get healed spiritually, who get healed mentally, also will find that it manifests physically, because and it may be on the practical side.
Right.
You realize, oh wow, I need to take care of myself.
Mm.
And maybe you eat healthier because now you're not operating in this inferiority or this whatever.
Right.
But I've seen it in a very real way. Now, on the second cancer I had, share more details. The second cancer was in my liver. And I, at that point, was not a teenager. I was 30 years old. I had kids.
So they're about 15 years apart, 16 years apart.
Yeah, 100%. And very different season of life. I'm like, God, what's going on with me? What am I going to do? What if I die? I don't want to leave my wife a widow, my kids orphans. Like, what's going on here? And so...
How many kids did you have by then?
4.
You had all 4? Okay.
Yeah, my youngest had just been born. So, yeah, it was a heavy season. And I literally...
Do you think the two cancers are connected other than the chemo? Do you think they're linked somehow?
They are and they aren't. So the second cancer was rooted in fear of man. Okay, big time. So I knew I needed to leave the nonprofit I was part of. I knew it. I love that nonprofit. It's great organization, helps thousands of people around the world, still involved in it loosely to this day. But it was the identity of my dad. It was the world that my dad brought me to.
Right.
And I love it. I still consider myself part of it. However, I knew that God had a different path for me, very different path for me. And it was different than what others in my family or in my circle were operating in. Yet I was working with the founders at a very high level of the nonprofit. This is a huge nonprofit called YWAM, and they're all over the world. 100,000 volunteers a year.
Wow.
Over 25,000 full-time staff. It's major. So
wow, that is major.
And so I'm working very closely with the founders, and I knew that I was supposed to be done, but I didn't want to disappoint anybody. I didn't want to hurt anybody. Didn't want to fail anybody.
Got it.
And so my dad, the founders of this, the other, and so I didn't. And this went on for like a year where I I didn't have any idea I had liver cancer, by the way. No idea whatsoever.
You weren't in pain, nothing?
Nothing. But I was in Thailand attending a conference, and I had a severe migraine hit me all of a sudden out of the blue, just out of nowhere. I'm on my knees, went to the hotel room on my knees, excruciating pain, feel like a knife's in my head.
Wow.
And I can't think. I couldn't open my eyes. And this went on for 6 weeks. Back in Hawaii, it went on for 6 weeks. I went and get treatment, did everything I could imagine. Is it neck? Is it neurological? Do I have a brain tumor? What's going on?
Right.
Did MRIs, they're like, your brain's fine. However, found a mass in your liver. So we did a biopsy, malignant cancer. And I'm like, oh gosh. So literally at this point, I'm like, I have cancer. What's going on with my life? Kind of like, woe is me.
Right.
And I'm in the shower crying, like literally on the floor. And I feel God speak to me saying, don't accept this. This isn't for you. This one is not for you. And I'm like, okay. So I got a lot of people together, and I got people praying all over the world. And we had some people literally like on the phone with me, and another couple in person. And we just like, we're not accepting this. And I realized as they were praying for me, realized that there was this fear of man component that was brought up. And I knew that I had to leave the nonprofit that I was part of.
Wow.
And disappoint some people.
You have to change the vibration.
100%. The frequency had to change.
Yeah.
So I made a decision then. And I said, I'm done. I made a big statement. I said, I'm leaving. I'm done. And the headache was gone within a second.
Wow.
Never came back. I was in agonizing pain for 6 weeks. And I felt this weird vibration in my liver. Went to Mayo Clinic in Minnesota because we still didn't have proof of it. They did another biopsy of the same mass they originally had pulled out from. And they're like, it's definitely malignant. So they did the surgery. So I have this huge scar here. And when they did the biopsy of the mass, they're like, took them 4 days to come back to us. And they're like, we don't know what to tell you because you had cancer, but now you don't.
What?
We don't know what to tell you. I'm like, what do you mean?
So was the surgery for nothing, in essence?
Basically. I have this huge scar on my stomach. I'll never be able to have the beach body I want. And so, like, literally, I'm like, okay, that's crazy. And so this Mayo Clinic doctor called my dad up. That he's a friend of my dad's.
Incredible,
and he's like,
David.
You just got to understand. My dad's name is Richard. Richard, that your son had a miracle. Mayo Clinic can never say that. But when Mayo Clinic says you had it and now you don't, we don't know what to tell you, that's their way of saying this is supernatural.
Right.
This is outside of the normal.
Right.
And so with that then came this, first of all, gratitude,
for sure.
Thank you, God, like all the things. But then this new lease on life where it was like, I remember very specifically waking up from that surgery. This is before I knew I was cancer-free. That waking up from the surgery, the anesthesia and all of it, and hearing God, not audibly again, this is more of a sense, but very strongly, if you know, like when God speaks,
I do.
Had this.
I've had it 100%.
So I'm calling you out of the nonprofit and into business, into entrepreneurship. And I'm like, yes, finally, I was so ready. And so that's where my life began to take off in this whole world of marketing, business, entrepreneurship, and personal branding, and now motivational speaking. So I'm writing a book to share these stories, some of these stories.
You must be one hell of a motivational speaker because you have quite a story to tell.
That's funny. I don't know. I would have never thought about it before, which was funny. It was a mindset thing,
Yeah. No, it's so powerful because it's such a story of perseverance, of you not giving up on yourself, and you betting on yourself, and you continue to push forward.
The only thing I can say is that kept me going is purpose. What's the point of living? We live, we die.
Yeah.
We eat, we wake up, we sleep. Yeah, we have kids, we have spouse, but this life is short.
Blink of an eye.
And literally, I think if I were to live to 95, it's 34,675 days, something like that I would live. I've lived about 13,500 days so far.
Wow.
We don't know how many days we have.
No, we don't.
And this life is so short. So what are we living for? What's our purpose? What's the legacy we're going to leave behind? What's next? So many things like that. And so I don't want to live my life superficially. I'm not beating people saying don't binge a Netflix one weekend. I've been there, done that.
For sure.
Regulate your nervous system.
Balance. Yeah.
But I'm talking about living that purpose life, that purpose-driven life, where each day you know why you were born, you know why you wake up, you know what your mission is, you're mission-driven, you're mission true, and you're here to kick some butt and to get it done because there ain't much time to do it. And that's the huge lie that I think so many people believe is they have time. We don't have time. So we don't want to live in anxiety. That's not the point. But that same purpose-driven life also allows you to live life. So it's not just like, I'm going to work myself to death. No, you're going to build up something that's going to work for you. And then in time, you're also going to have time to really live life, to actually have more meaningful time with your family, more meaningful time with other people.
Yes.
To do the things, to create opportunities. And I think that's what wealth does, success does, is it builds you this opportunity. It's an opportunity factory that as you can become successful, now you have the
100%.
means to invest in things.
The freedom.
You would want to. You wouldn't have had the opportunity to do before.
Correct.
And opportunities start coming towards you. So we talk about frequencies. And so many people, oh, my frequency. Well, yeah. But that frequency has to start with you. You are energy. Therefore, get the frequency going. It's not just going to come to you.
No.
You have to be putting it out.
You got to move.
You got to move.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think we have this fatalist idea of all these things. When we talk about frequency, we talk about energy, we talk about destiny, we talk about that, or even
manifestation,
God.
Right?
Manifestation. Oh, I'm just going to manifest
Right.
No, it's not how it works.
No.
It doesn't. You can't just sit there.
It meets you halfway.
Yes.
That's how it's been for me, right?
Yes.
I put in the work, I put in the time, and I control what I can, what I cannot control. I put it in God's hands, and He does His thing and meets me halfway.
100%. It is a co-creating process.
Yes.
With God. It's a partnership process. And if we have been all given tools, we have all been given unique assets, unique skill sets and gift sets that no one else has.
Right.
You are uniquely you. No one else will ever be like you. No one has ever been like you.
Right.
Ever. And no one ever will be you.
That's so powerful to hear.
Right?
Yeah.
There is no other Leo anywhere.
Yeah.
You are you. You are unique. So with that, if God has planted in you something uniquely you, why would you waste that? So, and you're not. I'm just speaking.
No, I get it.
Figuratively here.
I get it.
But if people can tap into that, and there's so many counterfeit realities of that, you're not going to find it.
Counterfeit realities, yes.
You're not going to find it outside of God. You're not. You can't find it outside of God. And people go, well, it's just, I need to go inward into self. Well, you know what? Your self deceived you your whole life. Your self will continue to deceive you. How many times do we think something that's not true? It is a counterfeit reality.
All the time.
So go upward. Look to God who designed you, who made you. If anyone knows the DNA of you, it's God. So why are we looking for answers within ourselves when we're confused people? It is within us because He's within us.
Right.
It's combined. Now, so there can go so many directions with that. But ultimately, the frequency goes like this.
Yes.
So upward, inward, outward. We cannot find it outward, inward.
Right.
It has to be upward, inward.
It's a download and execute.
Yep.
Right? Download, take action.
Yep. And that replenishing, renourishing, rejuvenating energy that God gives us, we will never run dry. We will never run dry if we're going upward. You want to talk about burnout? You want to talk about not having vision?
Right.
You're looking in the wrong places then.
Right.
If you want to look to self, burnout.
Elon Musk just came to mind right now. Someone who has a vision, is determined, has a goal, and just works 100 hours a week towards that goal in multiple avenues every single freaking day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he's got the means to do it.
Yes.
But that's the thing. He's created.
He didn't always though, right? He just kept going at it.
He came from a very humble background.
Yeah.
But I think he's got this almost like, what's the word? Unfiltered vision where maybe like he's got the genius level thinking.
Yeah.
Where he doesn't even, he's not even aware how strange he comes across.
No, he's definitely not. I know
Right?
what you mean. Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
he just
To him,
does-
it's normal.
Yeah, to him it's normal.
Yeah,
So he's
yeah.
just operating in a different wavelength. And I love that. And so yet he's created this symbiotic ecosystem where all of these things are contributing to each other. All of his businesses
Correct.
completely connect. And
Yes.
that's when you are an entrepreneur, you're creating symbiotic outcomes, symbiotic ecosystems within where this business builds into this one and this one flows into this one and this one creates this one. And that's where the true manifestation happens. The frequencies happen.
Right.
It's like, I didn't have to convince, a lot of people talk about, you start your first business, it's like hard. Second business, hard. Third business, hard. By the time you've got them going though, 3 years in, then they're flowing, and all of a sudden you have the credibility, you have the stamina, you have the reputation.
Yeah.
The opportunities actually come to you. How many times have I been asked to be part business owner of different businesses at this point? I've been asked a lot of times, and I've turned a lot of them down because it's not for me.
Right.
But I'm at this stage where, and this is where I'm at, I'm tired of doing the rat race. I'm really tired of it. And one of the things that I've realized through the inner healing work I've been through myself and just learning from trial and error is that I actually don't have to work so hard to make money.
You do not.
If
It's a myth.
It's a myth.
Yeah.
If I tap into the right thing. So the right thing for me, and we all have gift sets. We all have skill sets that are numerous ones. But the main one for me that I've known and seen to be true throughout my life, but I was too blind to see it before, was my ability to speak. So I don't have to work so hard to speak. I can speak on this podcast. I can speak on stage. I don't sweat it. I don't really get the nerves for it.
Comes natural.
Comes natural to me. And I can make money that way. So why would I want to run a marketing agency that I don't love doing? I'm good at it, but it doesn't satisfy me, and I have to work 24/7.
Right.
Now, there are people in marketing that other people that own agencies love that world.
Yes.
Is their world. They rock it. For me, I'm like, get me out. Like, I understand it. I know it. I'm strategic. I'm glad I have that foundation. It gives me authority in the realm of personal branding because of it.
And you have the freedom to hire someone, make them CEO, and just step out of it.
Step out.
Give me a weekly report, what's going on, and move on with your life.
I do not want to do the nitty gritty technical stuff anymore. So with that, it's understanding what your lane is and sticking to that lane up to a level.
Right.
Understanding that you're going to evolve all the time.
For sure.
You're never going to
every day.
Nobody stays the same, right? And so that's another myth that people have is that, you have to stay in the same thing the rest of. I'm like, no, you can change careers as many times as you want to in your life smartly, but like each one of them should build onto the next one.
So speaking of that, why do you think so many people struggle and have a hard time building a personal brand?
So first of all, they don't know themselves. Number one. Secondly, they don't know their target market. They don't know who they're talking to. So I ask people this statement: describe your tribe. If they can't do that, they don't know what they're doing from a personal branding standpoint. And so we talk about frequencies. You put out a frequency, then you need to know who you're putting that frequency out towards.
Right.
Everybody's got like this little antenna going, waiting for this
transmission.
Transmission.
Right.
You got to know who you're transmitting to, number one, or number two. So you got to know yourself. You got to know who you're targeting to. And then you also have to understand how it all works. Algorithms are real. SEO is real.
Yeah.
It's hard to build momentum when no one knows who you are. So how do you build momentum? It has to be numerous things happening at once.
Right.
So, prime example, I'm on your podcast. I've reached out to like hundreds of podcasts, not just yours.
I believe it.
Okay. And this month, because I got asked to be on hundreds, I was on 20. Now, a lot of them are virtual or in Zoom and different places around the world. You were like one of the only ones. I loved yours because I was like, the quality of your work you guys do, and you're like, I don't know, the guy over there in that corner does a really good job. And I was like, man, like the reels and the quality of the camera work and like the it's all good. The lighting in the background, the way you present and host,
I
it was so
appreciate
good.
that.
I'm like, I want to be on that one, and you're local, so we could be here in person. And so
I'm really glad this worked out.
yeah. So I was like really excited when you guys agreed. And but case in point, momentum, you need to have enough quantity and quality happening at the same time
Right.
to create momentum. Momentum is what? Energy, frequency. It's all those things. People go, oh, there's something happening with this guy. He's interesting. There's something happening.
Right.
And you look at any celebrity or a politician or any of the things, they plan everything about momentum. So it's not just like, oh, I have a book. It's like, I have a book, and now I'm also scheduled in advance on all these podcasts and these media outlets and all these things. And yeah, you oftentimes do have to pay for some of that.
For sure.
But if you get enough of the paid ones, if you're strategic around it, then you're going to get opportunities where you don't have to pay.
Right.
And where you can just be on because you have a level of influence.
And then eventually you get paid.
Exactly. So it's all has to work together. And so usually, like, and I'm a maximizer too. So if I get invited to do a keynote speaking gig somewhere, you got to dare bet I will not just go do that keynote. I'm going to look at who's the guest list. Number one, who's attending, anybody in that room I need to meet. So I want to make sure I have one-on-one scheduled in advance. Number two, are there local podcasts that I can go to in that city when I do a keynote?
Smart.
That I can schedule within the 2 days that I'm there.
Right.
Are there any bloggers, newspapers, articles, whatever that I should get on as well?
You're taking advantage and opportunity of the time.
All of it. And then every single person I meet, almost always at one of these conferences, will give you their business card.
Right.
What do most people do with their business card? And we forget about it. Even the ones where we scan, they're all cool and QR code things. We don't pay attention. What do? LinkedIn them immediately. Now, almost everybody has a LinkedIn, whether they're using it or not.
Right.
But they automatically get followed on LinkedIn. And then that puts them in the radar to see my content on social media. I will always, on my keynote speaking, include a QR code to my Instagram. Always. Always there. More important than my website, frankly. Because if they follow me on Instagram, they're going to see my content, and it's going to eventually funnel into my link in bio.
And your links are there also.
And I'd rather them do that. And then it is creating a funnel. So in marketing, it's all about creating marketing funnels from the digital standpoint, marketing funnels for a business. For a human being, it's the same thing. Personal branding, it's also creating a funnel. The funnel ultimately ends up to you. But automating your systems is super important. I don't want to have to book every single meeting. I want to have all my links in place so people can sign up. They can't afford my coaching. We have a mastermind that's only $19 a month that they can get all these workshops in. There's always something that so you're creating opportunities that work for you where you're not having to work so hard.
At multiple levels.
Multiple levels for anybody. So no one has, that's the other thing is no one should ever walk away from you empty-handed, ever. So whether you're imparting something to them or you're giving them free month to access to one of your platforms or whatever it is, create something where you're adding value to someone's life and ask them, get to know them. In networking, asking questions, you get 5 seconds with them. Sometimes, hi, tell me about yourself. What's your business? You ask them a question, they want to follow you. It's not a manipulation tactic. It's just genuine interest in human beings. And so,
what is it? The law of reciprocity?
Yes, reciprocity is huge. So creating momentum is a intentional effort to create a movement. And so with my daughters, for example, we've sometimes been in pools. It works especially in smaller pools, but we tried it in some bigger pools, and it actually does work. They're little. But literally, you've ever tried drinking a whirlpool?
Yes.
And so it's hard because you're trying to do it, but if you
a lot easier to do it in a bathtub.
It is. It is. But you get it in a pool, and I have 4 daughters. The one can't do anything; she just floats in the floaty. But like literally, we go. It's harder at first because building that momentum takes time, and we're like, ugh, okay. But then you keep going, and it gets easier because now the momentum's serving you too.
Right.
It's pushing you forward as well.
Right.
And all of a sudden, you can let go, and it carries you without having to do it anymore. And then it starts slowing down because momentum does not stay.
Correct.
You have to keep doing it. Even the most famous celebrities out in the world, most famous politicians, the most famous anyone,
Yes.
they have to consistently create momentum. Most people's, most fads are short-lived.
You should do that as a reel.
Yeah.
That's a really, good
idea.
reel.
That's a
so you
good
can
reel.
show like visually
Yes.
momentum. That's a great
Yes.
idea. You should do
It's
that.
true.
It's awesome.
It is true. And the other thing with momentum is the more people that get behind you. So using that same analogy of that pool, the more
Right.
people who hop in to do it with you, the more easy it becomes. So with good momentum, you can actually create movements. The more people who get part of that movement, the more it becomes a contagion then that starts spreading without you
Right.
having to do all the work.
The one thing I would say is definitely quality over quantity.
Yes.
Because you could have a lot of people that are not in line with you, but have a few that are, and you'll move a lot faster.
So pick your team wisely.
Yes.
I've learned that the hard way.
Same.
So
Same.
yeah, it's so true. Pick your team wisely.
Yeah.
Your inner circle it has to be the most confident, most trustworthy.
Yes.
They have to believe in the mission. This should not be finance based only.
Right.
And you have to love them.
Mm-hmm.
You can't get along with them and relational levels. It's not going to work.
I agree.
You have to really want to spend time with them outside of work too.
Right.
And so, but if you get that, yes, you can create this amazing momentum. But the momentum that's amazing is when people who don't know you start talking the way you talk and behave and pushing what you're putting out there.
Yes.
And I found it very interesting over the years where I put out these reels and things, and I find friends of mine doing very similar reels, like
funny.
almost verbatim. And you're like, I could take that offensively and
No,
be
it's a
like,
compliment.
and I could be like, wow, you just copied me. Or I could be like, hey, what am I doing this for? You
Total
know?
compliment.
Yeah, 100%.
I have a friend who owns a studio in Miami, and this guy that used to work for him built a studio, rented a place in the same building, and built a competing studio to his
Yeah.
without telling him.
The worst.
The worst. And my friend was like, same idea. I'm not sure if I should be offended or if I should be happy that my influence and what I've created has made him like it so much that he went and copied me verbatim down to the last plant.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. But how much of that will be sustainable when someone's literally trying to be a clone?
Right.
So you can't. It's not going to
No,
work.
it's not.
So in a way, it's like, okay. And
You
also,
don't have the same contacts. You don't have the same credibility.
also, this isn't my only idea. So you go for it.
Right.
Run it, because I'm already living 5 years into the future.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not living here now. You're seeing this right now. This is not my end goal.
Right.
My end goal is way beyond even the keynote speaking. I have so many ideas I want to have, and so I'm already thinking about when I'm old that I don't want to live in an elderly home or what do I want my life to look like then?
Right.
And so we have to. And again, I know everybody's brains are wired differently, and there is such a thing as different personality types, and whether
For
you look
sure.
at the Enneagram or DISC or whatever, you're gonna see that everybody is wired differently. My personality type is this way. I'm a persuader. I'm visionary. I'm all those things. That's naturally who I am. I'm never gonna be phlegmatic and stable.
Right.
It's always gonna be like
Same.
bored. Let's create something.
Let's do something.
Let's do something.
Let's blow
So,
something up.
Yeah, right. Or else it's dangerous. This is where we get in trouble.
What is your current view of the world in America?
Okay, so let's start with.
Not to get too political, but I do want to.
Yeah,
I like how you think, and I want to see how you view it.
I think the world is very different than America. So
And you have that world experience too, so you're a good
there
person
are
to ask.
systems in place that I think have primarily been propagated by America in the world that have been adopted.
For sure.
I would say that it's hard to define America in one thing. I think that's dangerous to do because every region, every area, every state, every city, every community within a city is
Very
completely different.
Yeah.
But overarching, I think that we have become shallow as a society, number one. Very shallow in the sense that it used to be, if we read articles about the U.S. from back in the day, 100 years ago, they always talked about things in the form of legacy. What was I leaving behind for future generations?
Yes.
We even see that in the pioneer days
For
where people
sure.
pioneered to these rural areas. It wasn't for them. They were doing it for their grandkids and
Yes.
to have opportunities. It was very future oriented. So it wasn't about satisfying my needs or my desires today. Number one. Number two,
So true.
Number two, I think, is that we are trying to create unity by forcing so many things in a non-humane way. So whether I'm not going to get too political here, but whether you're conservative or liberal or Democrat, Republican, doesn't matter to me.
Right.
Anytime you try to do anything top down, it doesn't work. If you're going to change society, it has to be as a culture. So look at yogurt. I have a certification in fermentation, actually, through Harvard.
Okay.
I wanted to learn more about fermentation and cultures and bacteria. And that brought me to understand the way culture works. Culture is a conglomeration of many components that creates this community where everybody goes, I get this because I'm part of it, right? And I'm comfortable in it.
Right.
Right. So it comes from heritage, and it could be religious. It could be cultural customs and grandparents and stories, and
Right.
it could be pop culture. It could be the neighborhood you lived in and the
Right.
local barber shop
Music
you
and
went to, and music and
dances,
dance. It could
right.
be so many things, but it creates this
Food.
comfortable common ground that everybody goes, I get this. I'm comfortable in this. Now, culture changes. Each generation, culture changes. It adapts, it evolves, especially as other cultures come into the mix.
Right.
So we can never try to control culture. And I was the VP for DEI for the American Marketing Association of Iowa.
Wow.
And when I took the role, I said, I don't want it long term, number one. I don't want it in general, but I don't want it long term. But I also you'll never hear me talking rules-based. Just because I'm a white guy doesn't mean I think white.
Right.
Just because someone might be Latino on the exterior doesn't mean he's Mexican
Right.
and thinks Mexican.
Right.
Where was he? What's his story? What's his background? Who is she? We need to value individuals. And so if we want to change society, we have to understand that society is formed of individuals and that these individuals are formed of families and these families are formed of communities. And if we do not value the individual, we cannot change society. And I see across the country, there is this movement, whether it doesn't matter what it's in, where we do not value individuals anymore.
No, we don't.
We're trying to create this herd mindset.
Just group them all together.
Group them all together. And it sounds nice because we're saying tolerance, which is not really used anymore as a term. But in the past, it was tolerance.
Right.
But it's not. We should do more than tolerate people. We need to love people.
Accept.
Know people.
Yeah.
Create belonging with people. Learn from people. When you travel a lot and you get embraced by different cultures and different forms of hospitality, and it doesn't matter. Some of the best hospitality I've ever had in my life was when I was in Egypt, and I got invited to this guy's home in very not great neighborhood, slummy neighborhood, and I went into the house, and they're all living in this little apartment. His grandparents, his parents, siblings, aunties, and they fed me on the floor, and it was time for bed, and the grandparents gave up their bed for me. It was the only real bed in the house.
Wow.
This bed was lumpy, was very uncomfortable, and I was like, no, I don't want to take their bed. But I knew I would be hurtful for them, that they were giving me the place of honor in their home, and I was going to offend them by not doing it. So I slept on the bed, and I thought to myself, this is the best hospitality I've ever been given. It was not about the quality of the environment. It was the heart.
The respect, yes.
The dignity that
the humanity, right?
Human beings have.
Yes.
All human beings are created in God's image and likeness. Each of us have value. Each of us are worth loving. Each of us. And so if we treat people that way, that you are created in God's image and likeness, God has planted something in you that is of value, and everybody is worth the time of day. I don't care where you are, what you've done, how many places you've been to or not been to, how poor you are, how rich you are. Every single person. I've talked with multimillionaires who are weeping with trauma,
Mm-hmm.
and I've talked with poor people on the streets who are weeping with trauma. I'm talking with indigenous people who have more wisdom than some of the people that you see that are in big society.
For sure.
Value the individual in front of you. And so I think that's really important. I think we are dehumanizing people by lumping them up together, and we are losing sight of the individual. Number one reason I think that we are losing sight of the individual is the phone that's in front of us. We think we're engaging with people by being on social media, and I found you on social media, right? I'm in the world of social media.
There's definitely a benefit to it, but I think we've gotten lost in it. I agree with you 100%.
It's a tool.
Yes.
It is a tool that is here
It's
to
not a
create
lifestyle.
opportunities for us
Right.
to meet people.
For sure.
But it is social media. It is meant to be
Yes.
social. And so, I've met this year, since January, I've met a good 120 people on Instagram that been on the phone with, been on Zoom with, now connected with friends, some of the ones I'm doing collabs with. I didn't know them. We did lead generation to find them. But literally, once I found them, you're my people. And that's how it works. And so I'm voice noting people who are like in career transitions and like Mexico and moving to the States, and like, you just never know.
Yeah.
So we have this is the land of opportunity. So the third thing I would say, this is the land of opportunity. That's what the United States is.
Yeah.
So many young people feel it's not anymore because it's harder in a way. Is there anything new under the sun? Is there anything new I can do? It's all taken. It's more expensive. What can I do? And people feel like, what's the point?
You don't think that's perception?
It's 100% perception.
Okay.
The opportunity is in front of us.
Oh, yeah.
It's
I think
within.
probably easier today than ever.
I agree. But the perception is, what's the point?
Mm.
It's taken. So that's the education system, which is a whole nother topic. But
Sure is.
We are not creating entrepreneurs through our education system. We're creating factory workers.
To get a little deeper political,
Mm-hmm.
because you brought up a really good point, and I really want to see your answer. How can we, what's the right word here? How can we assist? How can we help? How can we, I don't want to use the word force, but how can we make the Israelis and the Palestinians see the humanity in each other?
We have to heal the wound. And that's very complicated. So again, it cannot be political. It's not going to happen through anger. Keep in mind that this is millennia,
Yeah.
thousands of years.
Yeah.
And I'm no expert. And I have friends who are Muslims, and I have friends who are Jews. And I love both of them.
Same.
And so I think it comes down to understanding that the longer the wound is there, the longer it will take to heal. And we're never going to heal through anger. We're not going to. So I know that a lot of people feel that they're doing good by rising up in anger one way or the other.
Right.
But anger only begets anger. Hurt people hurt people.
Who needs to step up first? Who needs to show the first sign of love?
Me and you.
Mm.
We have to take personal responsibility.
What a great answer.
It always is that. It can never be that's their problem. Now, it might not feel like my problem because this is happening across the world. Oh, it's happening here too.
Right.
I have a choice to make. Am I going to get involved or not? And what's my lane? Evil conquers when good men do nothing.
Mm.
Now, the problem with political scenarios, religious and political and territorial scenarios, like the whole Palestinian-Israeli conflict, is that it is rooted in so many layers that we can never make assumptions about it.
Right.
So we have to garner information if we're going to actually understand what the solution is. We cannot come in with our Western mindset
Right.
and project it into something that has thousands of years of history, thousands of years of tradition.
And try to draw a line that's going to say,
You
hey,
just
okay,
need
this
to
is
love
yours,
each
this
other.
is yours.
It doesn't work.
Right.
It doesn't work. At the same time, there are forces at work there that are on both sides corrupt.
Oh, yes.
So we can, and yet there are innocent victims in the middle. So
The collateral damage. Yeah.
But that's war.
Yeah.
We live in a world where there's evil and
Yeah.
there's wickedness and corruptness and people who are dying in the middle of it. So it comes down to, are we supposed to carry the weight of the world? I can't.
No, it's too heavy.
Too heavy. God can, I can't. Number one. Number two, what's my area of personal responsibility? Well, my personal area of responsibility in relation to that is not much right now. That's me. Because there's not much I can do. But what I can do is I can teach people to value the individual. I can teach people to love their neighbor. Doesn't matter where they're from. Anywhere.
Yeah.
The one next door to you, the one online. We, through social media, say some pretty rude things to people because there's this filter.
Yeah.
These are real people. It's kind of like when we're driving. I had this today. I called someone an idiot who pulled out in front of me. And think about that. What if they heard you?
Right.
We say it because they don't actually hear us.
Right.
Would I actually get out of my car and call them an idiot? No. There's a human decency. I do know people who would. But I have enough human decency to not do that.
Right.
So why on social media do I feel like I have to spout out my opinion so aggressively to all these, which I don't do, but you see
Right.
that.
Keyboard warriors.
Right? And so people yell at the news. Oh, I can't believe this politician. Okay, what are you going to do about it?
Right. Nothing.
Nothing. So getting angry does nothing. Being angry steals energy. It's the same frequency of war, of retaliation, of bitterness, anger. It's the exact opposite of peace. So if we want to have peace, then we need to be peacemakers.
Yes.
And so we cannot bring peace by being angry. So my thing in it is get, again, the information. There's a lot of complexities there. It will not be understood from a Western mindset. Ask your local synagogue leaders to give you a workshop or something for the community about it. Go to your local mosque, get some information. I don't know. Get
Right.
the information. Don't make assumptions.
I love that. I love how you took a top-down view of your explanation, right? You began it at the culture level, and you brought it down to individuals. That's very cool.
Always has to be, though. It always has to be. And I think that personal responsibility is the number one thing that happens with anybody who overcomes trauma. It is you have to take personal responsibility.
Yes.
Anybody who's been an alcoholic or a drug addict, they have to take ownership of it.
Yes.
So, and anyone who makes change had to take responsibility. So my parents didn't have to go to Panama to work amongst indigenous tribes. They didn't have to. They could have been like, someone else will do it. But they knew the responsibility actually came because God told them to. So are we asking God? Are we open to hearing? Because that responsibility is not just found within. That responsibility can be given to us by God.
Quick question. At any point in your life, did you resent them for making that choice? No?
No. In fact, at one point they were like, we feel really bad because you didn't get our upbringing in Wisconsin where we can go hunting and fishing in the lakes and all the things. And my brother and sister and I were like, no way. We love growing up in Panama. It's been the best.
That's awesome.
Because we typically, especially kids, certainly we know like there are like the deletes in India who were born in abject poverty and they do not want to live there. I'm confident of that. But when you have a decent childhood, and everybody loves, for the most part, looks at their childhood with some nostalgia.
For sure.
Even if my daughter's reality is completely different than mine.
Oh, night and day.
Like completely different.
Night and day.
And I'm like, but they love it.
Yeah.
Because what they know.
For sure.
It's comfortable for them. It's secure. It's safe. So absolutely not. If anything, the only thing I would say that all of us have said over the years to our parents is that we did, because we lived in such a community-oriented nonprofit where there were people all around us all the time, we really wished we would have had a little bit more family time as a unit.
Got it.
But we also grew and matured so much because of the external voices too, where I have the worldview I have today.
Right.
Because of that. So
For
I'm
sure.
thankful for it. And I'm not.
You would have never gained that in Wisconsin.
I wouldn't have.
No.
I wouldn't have. And there was a Native American man named Richard Twist. He's passed away a few years ago, and he came down to Panama. He's a Lakota Sioux Native American man, very wise. And I came up to him one point and I said, I'm struggling. This was, I don't know how many years ago now, 10 years ago or something. And I said, I'm really struggling because I don't know where I belong. I'm a white guy living in Panama who's not Panamanian. I'm in the US. I'm not really from here. I love the indigenous tribes, but I'm not indigenous. Who am I? And he goes, that is who you are. He goes, you are David Allen Tracy, a diversely minded person, man of the world. That is who you are. That is your identity. You don't need to belong to one group. In my case, you can assimilate and belong to many, and that was really cool for me to hear from a Native American man.
Yes, truly a gift.
It was a gift, and this man was really wise, and I was like, wow. And he had that with his sons because he married a white woman, and his sons were part Native, part white, you know, and they're like, where do I belong? I'm not fully indigenous, but I'm not fully white. And we have that with second generation, you know, immigrants and in all the things. So the truth is that that sense of belonging, we talk about culture and it's always evolving, but that sense of belonging always is changing.
Always.
And our tribe, we say, describe our tribe. That tribe is constantly changing. It is not, I don't like to use the word race because there is one human race only, but it's not about ethnicity anymore as much as it is about cultural sharing of values.
Yes.
And so do we share common values?
100%.
And so we can share common values with people all around the world. And so...
And most do.
Yeah, very much so. Most people actually want the same things.
Yes. Most people are good. There's definitely evil, but most people are good.
And most people want the same things. They want to protect their children.
Yeah.
They want to have wealth.
Live at peace.
Be at peace. They want to be healthy. They want to know God. The problem that is that we so often, through societal norms and structures, which is different all around the world, that ability to do that can sometimes be limited.
For sure.
And so
others get more than others, and that's where the problem comes in, and the jealousy and the envy
and there are some huge injustice issues that need resolved. But injustice issues and societal structures change by understanding the way society is built. There are 7 spheres of society, mainly government, education, religion, family, commerce. What is the other one? Arts and celebration, communications. All of these things are systems.
Right.
Each of these systems come together and create society.
For sure.
These systems are comprised of individuals and human beings that believe certain things and have certain values. And depending on who's making decisions within those systems and structures, values begin to permeate throughout.
Yes.
And so if you want to make a change, let's even talk about the whole Palestinian-Israel situation right now. It's going to take time. And that is going to come about through, number one, gathering the information from all parties, and then getting people to communicate about this, and people to make art about it, and people to talk about it in media, and people to talk about it in universities, and people to talk about it in government, and to create movements and to create momentum in society. You have to have many moving parts from many components coming together and creating that momentum. So that takes time. So if we look at it from the standpoint of any type of reformer, Martin Luther King Jr., a movement had to happen across the country.
Yes. And
it was all spheres. So, and there was a price to pay. Nothing that's worth doing is ever going to be easy, and people or free, and people will get hurt, and in some cases lose their lives because they stood up for what was right. But if you're fueled by the fire of this is right because it's based on truth, and the truth is all mankind is created equal, and all mankind is deserving of life, then putting one down in order to elevate another is never going to work. It has to be both sides are loved and valued, and we have to identify that the system is corrupt. The people oftentimes are not.
would you say that this recipe creates a leader? Is that the recipe for a leader?
The recipe for a leader is, can you have people follow you? But a good leader will create momentum that keeps going without him or her in the picture. Just that pool analogy.
Yep.
If my daughters keep doing it, if I step out, they can keep following in that momentum without me being in the picture. I think the problem with a lot of bad leadership is we think we need to stay. Good leaders create movements that move beyond them.
What a great point.
And the problem is we as human beings love control.
Yes.
And that's where corruption comes into play. If we could let go of control, again, that comes down to valuing the individuals.
Right.
You don't need to control them. They are worthy of being able to figure this out as well. Teach them, equip them, let them loose. The next generation can run.
That was very, very insightful. If you could go back in time and you could tell your younger self one thing to change or to guide you in certain ways, what would that be?
I would have told myself when I was first sexually abused to go tell my parents right then. But for whatever reason, there is a vicious cycle of shame, fear, and control that all human beings operate in.
Yeah.
Where when something bad happens to us, the first thing we feel is shame. We feel ashamed, we hide.
You just want to block it out, right?
We feel ashamed, we feel afraid, and we try to control it by 4 ways. One of them is to be in denial of it and to hide it, to bury it under the rug. Sweep it under the rug, bury it away, and pretend it didn't happen. The other one is to blame yourself and carry that cross. That's my burden to carry. And then we end up with this victim mindset, which also causes us to either 1, be in isolation and inferiority, or 2, to operate in superiority. No one's ever going to hurt me again. Or, fourthly, we enter into some form of a coping mechanism, which may be some sort of a drug, alcohol, relationships,
an escape.
Work,
Right.
some sort of escape.
Yeah.
Where all along, if we had just been vulnerable, now as a child, it's hard to do.
For sure.
When something like that happens as a child, and most of the traumas we have nowadays as adults usually stem from childhood. They might not be as severe as sexual abuse. They might be other things. They might be the drip trauma of a parent saying negative things to you,
right,
or whatever it is. We don't always identify it then. But if I could go back, I would have opened up sooner. And I wouldn't have formed certain patterns in my life that I still have to this day that I'm working on. And so that's number one thing. And with the shame, fear, and control, shame is not just embarrassment. Shame is not just being found out.
Right.
Shame is the rawness, the nakedness of your soul. It is and when you first meet your spouse, for example, and for the first time, you're naked together, there's no shame in that moment. There's love, there's safety, there's security. But if you were just suddenly stripped naked in the streets with people that didn't know you, there would be shame. And the first thing you'd want to do, because it's not supposed to happen that way,
right,
you would go hide.
And protect yourself. Yeah.
And you would keep doing that. And because that's just the way we're wired. So if we want to help, again, getting back to the societal level, help people overcome control, we have to go back to the shame. Where was the first wound? Where did this wound come from?
Right.
And heal generations. It's hard to do. So going back to that humanity, that human level, that all people have shame, and all people have fear, and all people control in different ways. And so we have to bring it back to the individual. And we also have to understand that we'll never have all the answers. So that's where I also go upward. I want wisdom. I do not want my own advice. I want wisdom in what I do. So if there is a complicated matter, which I've had to deal with different ones over the years, especially in the nonprofit realm,
right,
I never assume anything. I can't. You just never know when you're hurting someone without trying.
Right.
So use patience, use wisdom, be compassionate,
Use humanity.
use humanity.
Yes. David, are you living your dream life? If not, what else do you feel like you need to accomplish to do in your life to be living your dream life?
I think I'm beginning to live my dream life. I think that it's really been, I think there's been different phases to that story. And I'll probably say that again in 8 years, 10 years. I'm like, I'm just beginning my dream life. Because we're always looking at things
Right.
in the realm of not, I did this served a purpose. But I do see the way I've been even speaking today with you is a complete cocktail of layers from my childhood, from the nonprofit years, from
Yes.
travels, from marketing, from trauma healing, to all of it blended together, which is my story. And getting to that realm of storytelling again, personal branding is storytelling. It's knowing how to tell your story in such a way that it resonates with others. And so I'm beginning to really tell my story and to tell it on podcast, soon on a book, on stages. And I'm excited for where that's going to go. But I'm also well aware that I'm 38 years old. My story is just beginning, I hope. And that the stories I'll tell and the values that I'm going to be sharing will continue to grow and I hope mature over time. So I feel like I have a long way to go, but I also know that a lot of people spent some time with me saying, David, you need to be telling your story. You should be speaking.
Yeah.
And at first I didn't believe it. I was like, I'm not going to talk to people about that stuff. So I had to overcome some,
That's always the first reaction.
right?
Always.
I don't know. I mean, if you were like, yeah, I want to tell my story to everybody, there's probably something wrong.
Right.
So the motivation's probably not right. But in my case, I've heard enough times now with people that said you have a unique point of view and a unique story, and it encourages me. So please tell this to someone else.
Yes.
And so then it's like, okay, that story, trauma, if it's healed, is now an asset. I have a whole keynote I do that's called, if I could remember what it's called, Trials to, I forgot it. It's like Trauma to Transformation, but it's not that. I will have to look it up later. But Trials to Triumphs. Trials to Triumphs. So from trials to triumphs.
That's a great point. Once you heal it, it's now an asset. Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
It is an asset.
Yeah, because now you can use it for good.
Mm-hmm. And it's like with going back to the fitness model. If you are working out, your muscles are sore, they're hurting, all the things, and you're putting your muscles to trauma.
Yes.
But now they're assets over time. They become muscle.
They start growing.
They start growing and getting
Yes.
stronger. And so
And building muscle memory.
that too, all of it.
Right?
And you got to take care of those muscles and not overdo them and eat properly and all the things. So trials to triumphs. And so I hope I don't have more traumas in my life going forward or trials. But the reality is we live in a sucky world sometimes that has sucky things that happens to good people.
Yeah.
And so it's likely. And yet, do I have enough tools now to where when those trials come, that rather than follow in the same patterns I used to, where they weigh me down for months or years even,
Right.
that I can go, I identify this from the objective standpoint, not the subjective standpoint anymore. We're looking at this from the high elevation view, from God's view.
Yes. Top down.
Top down. All right, I'm no longer in the war movie subject to the bullets hitting me. I'm watching the war movie.
Right.
And I am no longer subject to that reality anymore. I am living in a different reality. I'm living in God's perspective of reality. Totally different mindset. So then you won't fall into the same patterns.
With that said, what's next for you?
Next thing for me is I'm writing my book, and I'm hoping to get published end of this year. And that will be a book on identity, healing, trauma, and my story woven throughout, and a lot of things we talked about in this podcast, valuing humanity.
It's amazing.
So
Let me know if you need a publisher. I have a good one.
all right, I'll let you know for sure.
Yeah.
I love that. So that's the next thing, and I'm also getting on more stages. We're doing a lot of pushing out a lot of lead generation for stages, keynote speaking workshops. I have half-day workshops I do as well. That's probably the main thing that I'm pushing out right now. And I do provide personal brand coaching for people, theta healing for people if they want it. My website's davidallentracy.com. You can find my initial consult there you can have 30 minutes free with me to just talk, whoever's watching.
What's your IG also?
David Allen Tracy.
Perfect.
Yeah. So yeah, I love meeting people. So anyone watching this, listening to this, you want to just have 30 minutes. There's no commitment. Just want to connect and see how I can help you. Love to. So
that's awesome. David, what a great conversation. I can talk to you all day. I really can. I love the conversation. I love where your head's at. I love where your heart's at. You have an amazing story to tell. I can't wait to see what you do next. On a serious note, I really can't wait to see. Like, I really can't.
Well, we're going to stay connected.
100%.
We will, for sure.
100%. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We are now going to move on to the members-only section of the podcast. To continue watching, hit that subscribe button on Patreon. Join us to see some rapid-fire questions at David. See you guys later. Like, subscribe, hit that bell notification, and we'll see you soon.
This is the Leo Clamaco Podcast.